I want us to talk about the state of high school recruiting when it comes to the college football world, because these kids now, we had 45 of them, give or take, of the top talent in America, the top high school players in America, in Nashville, Tennessee for the On3 Elite Series, and got to sit down with them one-on-one, pick their brain, talk on the record, talk off the record. And one of the things that I came into that event thinking about, and I'm still thinking about now, is there has never been more thrown at these kids as recruits than there is right now. NIL is the headline, right? These kids are probably, in some regards, different top prospects are in the range of like 6 to 7 figures. You have to imagine they're bringing in. Social media. I mean, these kids are celebrities before they even step on campus at their respective schools. Like, I guarantee you, Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee, when he stepped foot in Knoxville for that first class, like everybody, I promise you, probably wanted to take pictures. At the very least, they knew who he was from a distance. Like, you are a celebrity as a high school recruit these days before you even play a snap of college football. That's a lot of pressure. The coverage of recruiting, it's massive. Like, recruiting is the lifeblood of college football, and we have, I think, gotten more and more a gauge for that as a college football public. And so there is a demand to know about who we're recruiting, what that recruit brings to the table. Are they going to commit or are they not going to commit? I mean, commitments in general today are productions more than ever before. So the pressure around these kids is immense. It's enormous. They're like 17, 18 years old having to deal with adult kind of situations. And so for the schools and for the staffs, there has also never been more pressure to evaluate the mental makeup of these kids. So I'll tell you what, man, 17-year-olds, you're not supposed to be the face of a franchise, but in college football you are, especially if you're a quarterback. So how are they going to respond to however many NIL dollars thrown their way? How are they going to respond to people on social media saying negative things to them? How are they going to respond to not performing well when they have a big NIL payday already coming their way and the boosters are upset? Like, there's so many other things outside of football that these kids now have to deal with. And I think as a coaching staff, like I just said, knowing how they'll respond to that and knowing their competitive DNA, how they're going to be able to handle those things, the importance of that has never been greater. I think it's also worth noting that when it comes to recruiting at the high school level, the kids that are actually playing the sport from a football perspective have never had more resources and more development than they do right now. Long gone are the days where you play 3 sports, maybe 4 sports, depending on your high school, because you're a great athlete and you want to do it one more time with your boys. You want to play baseball. You want to play basketball. Now, especially if you're a quarterback, you specialize in playing quarterback year-round. You play 7-on-7, you work with your quarterback coach, you're with your high school team, and that just is rinse and repeat for 4 years, so you are the most polished product you can be by the time you get to the collegiate ranks. So when you talk about how they're translating to the college level, not just quarterbacks, but players in general, I think sports science also has a lot to do with this. We're seeing more freshmen show up on campus ready to play. I don't have any numbers to back this up, but it feels like to me there has never been more freak show true freshmen at different schools that show up and turn heads during either spring ball or winter conditioning or whatever. And some of that's just because, or not winter conditioning, I suppose winter conditioning factors in, fall camp. Like, there's so much these kids have access to be college ready that I don't think we've had before. And so I think that's arguably more important than it's been in the past, because the way the portal works now, your situation as a high school kid, as a true freshman, what you commit to can change at the drop of a hat. I keep going back to the quarterback because I think that's just the most comprehensive position for us to talk through. I understand as I go to college, the thing I'm being told, the thing I am believing as I commit to my school is I'm going to redshirt for 1 year. I'm going to learn what I need to learn, figure out college life, and then my true sophomore year, I'm playing ball. I'm the guy. That's the blueprint laid out for me, right? When I commit, when I put pen to paper. Well, as it turns out, during that 1 year where I was redshirting, coach is on the hot seat. We got some problems. He's got to win now. He doesn't have the luxury of relying on a first-time redshirt freshman playing quarterback for him, first-time starting quarterback in college football. We don't have that luxury. So what happens? They go to the portal. They bring somebody in. And now, as a redshirt freshman that I previously thought I would sit 1 year then play, I now have a decision to make. Am I going to sit for another year, wait my turn, compete for the job, or maybe more than 1 year? Do I jump in the portal and go somewhere else? Like, the portal has thrown a massive variable into the high school recruiting world, obviously for these kids, but also for these coaches, For these staffs like you now, in a lot of ways, don't have to lean quite as heavily on the high school level or development. You can go to the portal and use it how Lane Kiffin has used it and have that be your bread and butter and be how you build your football team. For Florida State, it can be the way that you re-energize your football team. Like Mike Norvell, when he got to Tallahassee, that was not an operation that had the talent that he needed to win at the highest level. So what does he do? Goes to the portal, markets playing time, markets the ability to develop at Florida State, and they've done a great job of that. And now you're starting to see some return on investment on the field to the high school recruiting trail level. Not always going to be the way that these teams operate, but those teams used to recruit in the 20s, both Florida State and Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss probably wants to keep leaning on the portal. Florida State, I think they want to continue to lean on the portal, but also on the high school level. The bottom line is your strategy has changed if you're a college football head coach with how you recruit and how you handle the portal. It's no longer, lean on the high school level and maybe use the portal. It's like, no, we're using the portal. It's just a matter of how much we're going to use it this upcoming season and how much we need to use it based on our roster. Relationships at the high school level used to be all you would talk about when it came to why kids would choose a school. And NIL, like I said previously, it gets the headlines now, and it should. It's a massive part as to, where I would go to school if I were a top recruit at the high school level. But I think, going back to what I just said, it has never been more important to finish on signing day in the top 3 to 5 for a top recruit. Because we've seen this now multiple times. Coach leaves, kids unhappy, situation isn't what they thought they were getting into. They jump in the portal. Who's typically the schools that we look at first? Hey, who did they have a relationship with out of high school? Hey, who recruited them hard that they almost maybe gave a little bit of extra consideration to before they signed with the other school? Like Caleb Downs is a great example, and I've told this story before on this show. I'm at Michigan, Ohio State. The year is 2022. We're in Columbus. Massive game, massive recruiting weekend for the Buckeyes. Caleb Downs is committed to Alabama at this point in time. However, he ended up on Ohio State's sideline that day. Little surprise visit, shows up in Columbus, and taking an extra look at the Buckeyes. So what that tells me is Caleb Downs more than likely had a good relationship with that Ohio State staff out of high school, even while being committed to Alabama. If he didn't, I don't know why you would take a visit the day of the Iron Bowl. I get Ohio State-Michigan's a great game, but it is what it is. So then fast forward the tape. Nick Saban retires. Caleb Downs jumps in the portal. And where does he end up at? A lot of smoke around Georgia, but he ends up at Ohio State. And I'm not, so naive to assume there weren't other factors involved there as to why you would pick Ohio State. But again, the relationship side of things. If Ohio State, on signing day, when Caleb Downs ends up committing to Alabama, or staying committed to Alabama rather, puts pen to paper, if that staff and Tim Walton had just said, forget this guy, and they just totally cut ties, burned the bridges, all that, you think Caleb Downs is transferring to Ohio State when Nick Saban retires? No. So again, the relationship side of things and continuing those relationships and making sure you leave off on a good foot whether or not that kid commits to your school, that's massively important. Massively important because you never know who you're going to have a second chance at recruiting if you don't get them at the high school level. Going back to what I said, it's never been more important to be in that top 3 to 5 range, be one of those hats on the table for these top kids on National Signing Day. So for high school players and for just the recruiting world period, NIL is a major factor. That's 100% true. But I think the thing that we've continued to be told by big college football is, hey, NIL is going to provide massive parity to recruiting. Like you're gonna see just a total shakeup in the college football world, and different teams are going to win more national championships and this, that, and the other. And what we've said on this show is there is a level of truth to that statement. It's absolutely true. If you want to get into the NIL game and be a major player, you're going to give yourself a better chance to land more top recruits. However, in 2020 rather, these teams were all in the top 10 of the industry team recruiting rankings. You had Bama, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ohio State. That's not in order, by the way. That's just the schools that were in the top 10. Fast forward the tape. NIL world, right? We're here in 2024. All those schools were still in the top 10. So I'm not saying NIL doesn't factor in, but to assume that that's going to just shake up the entire landscape and you're having, Ohio State fall out of the top 10, like listen, these big brands, these big boys, these big fan bases, they got deep pockets too. They got resources too. They're going to play the game. And when it comes to actually playing the game of football on the field, here's what wins: talent, culture, coaching, development. Notice, talent is the only part of that equation that relates to NIL, that relates to recruiting. Now, recruiting and talent is a massive, massive piece of that pie. Do not get it twisted, but to assume that just because NIL is a factor now, we're going to have X, Y, and Z teams come out of nowhere and win national championships, to me, that's a harder sell. That's a harder pitch for me to get behind. So the sentiment I want to kind of drive home there, what works previously, those things I just mentioned, those key ingredients, coaching, development, culture, talent, still what works today in modern college football. As much as the landscape is changing and shifting and we're having revenue sharing conversations with, the way that these kids can now be paid, I understand all that. That's all fair. But to talk about what we talked about this past week at the On3 Elite Series, the main thing, which is football, is still the main thing for a lot of these kids. The main thing, which is relationships, is still the main thing for a lot of these kids and for this staff as well. Winning football games, the results, the main thing, that still is what comes before any NIL payment or anything on that front. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.